start by introducing our two guest speakers, discussing the work of John Hutton, the famous artist and glass engraver. Claire Bell, next to you here, is an artist currently working with glass, living in Castlecliff, Wanganui. She's been working with engraved glass since 2016. Originally from England, she emigrated with her family in 2003 and went to Elam School of Fine Arts to study painting. She became involved with some projects on the side, making lead lights, which culminated in her taking a glassblower's apprenticeship with Gary Nash. Wishing to bring all her skills together and to treat the glass as a canvas, Claire set out to find out how John Hutton had done his, and she has set out to make her work in this way ever since. Millie Mitchell-Anyon is curator of the Dow's Art Museum in Lower Hutt. She is a current trustee of the Wanganui Regional Museum Civic House and the deputy chair of the Blumhardt Foundation. She's previously worked at the Sargent Gallery in Wanganui, Dunedin Public Art Gallery and Pukearike Museum in New Plymouth. She has an MA in Art History from Victoria University and a postgrad diploma in Museum Studies. Kia tau te arangi Mārie o te atua kia koutou. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Claire Bell and Millie Mitchell-Anyon.
Thank you for the welcome, Matt. I think we wanted to gather here first so that we could engage with the work before we went in to have a slideshow and have a sort of more in-depth sort of technical talk. So I guess what we really wanted to do is to show and tell, touch. Yeah. Come and engage with the works, come up closer, come and see them, and then we'll sort of explain how they're made and talk about John's life, essentially.
Yeah, that's right.
But one of the most, the thing that I really like about them is that the angels are sort of a nod to the ones at Coventry Cathedral. Mm-hmm. And I just learned from Claire that the man who designed Coventry Cathedral, Basil Spence, also designed Parliament across the road, and so we'll get into some more links.
The beehive. The beehive. Yes,
the beehive. You know, they're over there. It's the precinct. But you're right, it's the beehive.
We wrote on a napkin at dinner as a rough guess. What do we have here?
It was a pretty good, rough drawing, really, wasn't it? So come closer. Yeah. There's a few around. So there's 4 panels.
4, so 2 flanking either side and the 2 facing you here today. And we want you to interact with them. Like, we encourage you actually to touch them, which is not what you normally do in an art gallery. But that's how, when I'm making a panel, I learn whether it's right or not through touch. So if anybody's got any spiky rings on, maybe just use your fingertips, but go for it, and that will prompt some questions, and you'll get a better understanding of what we're talking about in the slideshow as well.
Have a little. This is the first time I've touched them because I feel really nervous touching artwork. Too much training.
It's okay, we've got window cleaner.
You need your white gloves.
It is to engage with as you're coming in.
It is. More around the side, and more around that side. Yes, I hope so. We just heard about them yesterday. Yep.
Now that the reason why I think that both Claire and I are also sort of connected to this talk is because he went to Wanganui, which is where I'm from and where Claire is also living. And so his father was the Crown Prosecutor in Wanganui, and his dad, so Colin Hutton, he was one of the best barristers in New Zealand at the time, but he unfortunately died quite young. I can't quite remember how, but
I'm not sure the age, but John was 15 when his father died, and unfortunately it was on John's birthday, so he never really forgot it. He suddenly became head of his household. He was the second eldest child. The eldest was his sister Elia, I believe.
oh yeah.
Oh, hang on. Hello? Right. So John's father, Colin, died when he was 15 years old on his 15th birthday, and John became head of the household. He had 6 brothers and sisters, so he was one of 7, and he was the second eldest child. And he was granted a year to finish school, and then he started training in his father's legal office because they needed money, he had to put his art training that he wanted to go to on hold. And it was eventually, I think when he was about 18, he was sent to Wellington to continue his legal training, and he started to take art classes again. And he was learning with somebody I think who'd come over from the Royal College, and he continued painting and had spent the following 10 years, I believe, in Wellington. During this time he painted, he made exhibitions, and he also met, I believe her name is Nell Blair, who he married in this cathedral, well, the previous incarnation of this cathedral in 1934. And John at that point, I think in 34, he became unemployed. And he started to work more as art full time. He worked in an architectural draft office, and they commissioned him to do murals around New Zealand, mainly for painting out cinemas, I believe. But up here you can see a photograph of John and Nell, I think probably taken around the time of their wedding. They're quite young, they're maybe 28.
That's all right. We'll get the hang of the swapping over microphones. One of the painter that he learned from was Christopher Perkins, who, if you can kind of imagine a painting of Taranaki, that's the one he did. Not the very, very triangular, heafy one, but the sort of 1930s kind of pseudo-cubist Taranaki painting, which Christopher Perkins was brought over on the La Trobe scheme from Australia, and I think they were bringing in, was it Australian? I think it was Australian, but it was sort of British, Australian artists to come and train New Zealanders how to paint, how to make art. And so I think he left his life in law at that point as well. And yeah, here I found the marriage certificate in the paper, on Papers Past, which was on September the 11th, 1934, St Paul's. They got married, which was a nice little link, I thought. And then they moved to England, essentially. Right before, they had an exhibition at the Academy with Corrie Cameron, who is the stepmother of the first Douse director, which was another nice little link that we sort of found. And I did bring the letter where I found this out. It was in the Douse archives. And it was quite funny because John wrote to David, and he said, "I was very interested to hear that your wife's mother is Corrie Cameron. My former wife, Nell, has," spoiler alert, there was a second wife, "has very vivid memories of younger days in Paris and would like to be remembered to her. New Zealand is the only country I know where you can say, I know someone called ... and immediately find that even if you are not related, you have friends in common." Which I thought was quite funny because it now lives on in the Douse archives. So let me just go through some of the works that he was doing at the time. So these watercolours are in the Sargent collection, and they have quite a broad date on them, between 1920 and 1954, but it would definitely be down the 1920s, 1930s era, sort of.
Probably 30s.
30s, no, he wasn't in England in the 20s. And so the Sargent Gallery and Wanganui Collegiate have quite a few of John Hutton's works because he went there as a student and lived there for several years. So, yeah. So these are an example of some of the murals he did when he made it to England. And I think talk just a little bit about them. He started doing public commissions for architects in particular, and these ones that you see in front of you up here are from the SS Orchides. It's from the Orient Line, which had a policy of prioritising New Zealand and Australian artists. So that was a great sort of commission to start sort of boosting and sort of starting his career over in England. But it was, I found in one of the sort of books that they were talking about they had to keep moving because they couldn't get enough sort of money as an artist, and I was like, oh, nothing really has changed, has it? You sort of have to, they had to keep moving and going into smaller and smaller apartments so that they could afford to pay the rent. And Nell was, at the time, said there's lots of work, but no one ever pays, at least not until months after, and we have to spend it on rent, electricity, bread, bacon, beer, and bus fares. Which I was like, those are the priorities, I guess. So again, not much has really changed. And I think why I also wanted to sort of put this in the slideshow was that it's that he's forming all these relationships with architects and people that he was meeting at the time, and he had met members of the Bauhaus, so Marcel Breuer and Freddie York, and this is sort of like boosting his sort of mural production. I don't know if you want to add anything.
What is that? What is that picture of? Is it war? What is it?
Okay, so we believe this is one of the staterooms on the Orcades, and each stateroom had its own mural. So a different artist would have painted each stateroom. I think John did about 4 or 5, and he also decorated the bar.
But what is that?
But I think this is quite surrealist. It's sort of in the style of Dali, but the original sketches were from when he went on holiday in Normandy, and it's traditional fishing gear. It's a beach, I believe, with some extras. And some farming equipment too.
Which you find at the beach.
Mm. Okay, so John had a very short time as a muralist because they arrived in 36 and 39 war broke out, and he also suddenly had twin boys to care for. They were born right before the war broke out, and he was conscripted and ended up in the camouflage unit. And the camouflage unit didn't have a lot of money. I don't think anybody really understood their importance at the beginning of the war, but they recruited artists to be able to disguise things like airfields, boat yards, ships in dock, to fool the enemy into thinking there was either nothing there or very little, or to maybe think that the airfield was somewhere else. And John went out to the Middle East to do this, Cairo. Actually, my geography is terrible, I do apologise, but he went out there, he spent about 3-4 years out there, and we can see a little painting of him a little photograph of him on sick leave painting in Cairo, up here. They worked out a system, I think using netting, I think it was called shadow house technique, which has been used extensively in warfare since then, to remake the shadows that you see from the air, and so you think that it's just stone civilian housing and so forth. And they had tremendous problems, like things just got washed away or blown away in sandstorms until they could work out what to do. It took thousands of local workers, and they ended up employing the women to do it because all the men were off. So they'd come in the morning, bring the little ones, and they'd do all the work painting the buildings to disguise them, and then they'd go home, make their lunch for the men, and come back in the afternoon. And he spent many years doing this. He was invalided out and then came back to England and became Chief Camouflage Officer in England. And his deputy was Basil Spence, who did the beehive. Most of the people in the Camouflage Corps ended up being the artists in Coventry Cathedral. It's not the old boys club, but it's just connections, people you've worked with, you can trust. And that seems to be a lot of what we're finding as with the research in this, is the connections.
Can I just add a quick story to that?
Yeah.
I saw a fascinating documentary a few years ago. One of the people involved with this whole camouflage operation was a guy called Jasper Maskelyne, who was a famous magician, and he worked in the West End of London and made a huge name for himself in the music hall. And then war came, he had this idea of helping to create this camouflage. And I think in preparation for El Alamein, he was instrumental in persuading the Germans that the attack was going to come 50 miles to the south of where it actually did. And they built all these what looked like water drains and connections, and they built fake tanks and all sorts of other things. And it literally did help turn the war in that part of the country. So it was a fascinating period.
Invest in the arts. Oh yeah, take it. I had a little go. So one of the other things that sort of came out from the war was that there was a lot of new infrastructure builds and a lot of new buildings being built, which required architects and artists. And so these are just a sort of a sample of some of the murals that John Hutton was doing post-war. There is the furniture exhibition stand at the British Industrial Fair in 1949. What is that? The mural for Crosby and Company and Women at War. And so there's this nice new investment in arts, public art, murals, kind of, you can see there's a drastic difference between the two sort of murals as well. It's very modernist versus these sort of kind of proto like 1930s, war art essentially.
I think it shows the flexibility. I think these two examples show the flexibility you had to have as a mural artist, and it's also almost a department that no longer exists. We have graffiti artists, we have street artists. Mural artists they had their own society formed in 1939. They encompassed other connections John had made at the tail end of the Bloomsbury group. So we have Vanessa Bell in there making murals, I think Stanley Spencer as well. But everybody was scrambling around for work, and you had to cater to the client. And so we have abstract here, and we have something very figurative on the left. Oh, my left. Okay, so here we have two lunettes from Guildford Cathedral, and these are post-war. These are something that John was starting to be asked to do more and more. Pre-war, he had his very first one, he had just done the design work for, and he had done a panel for a shipping company of the Cutty Sark. And he'd done a few goddesses, I believe, again for Orcades and the steamliners, but these lunettes were for Guildford, and they were his first, I think, religious commission. And this was also where he started to realise that something was wrong. He was handing his drawings to a craftsman, and they were getting softened. They were not quite what he wanted. And also, in bright, bright sunlight, they disappear. Unfortunately, beautiful as they are. So this was the point where he was starting to think, maybe I need to do something else to find a way to sort of rupture this breakpoint so the artist has more control over the vision that they're presenting to the public.
So yes, these were also sandblasted, which
Yeah.
is what we'll...
So we have... Oh, yeah.
Oh, should I go next?
Yep, no, that's good. Okay, so here we're going to start to get a little bit technical. Up here, the gentleman in the orange t-shirt is my friend Dave. He's in Torquay. He's a sign painter, glass gilder, and brilliant cutter. And brilliant cutting it can be done in two ways. Architecturally, you bring the panel, as he is doing, to the grinding wheel, and you can create very curvy marks, very soft marks, but mainly it's decorative cutting. It's often used for old pub mirrors or doors. A lot of the older public houses, you might see frosted doors in Victorian ones, and that's what you would get with brilliant cutting. And that was the technique John was working with for Guildford. So his designs would be done in the same way that Dave's performing here, held on a strap over a wheel. But it's kind of, John described it as putting a pencil in a vice and holding a bit of paper over the top. You're going to get a different result. And I just put the gentleman on the right as well to show you how it's done on a smaller scale on a vessel. And this is still called cutting. And we're going to go to the next one. So here you can see types of glass engraving. The traditional one is my friend Catherine at the lathe holding the small bowl to the wheel. Again, a bit like the cut, but with engraving it's more of a design. So it's usually pictorial. On the right, left, right, you can see me demonstrating a small little panel that I did when I had my mentorship with Jenny Conway, who learned off John Hutton. And so you bring, in this case, you bring the tool to the glass, and it's much more like a paintbrush or a pencil. You start to get some freedom with your marking. But as you can see, I'm holding it with two hands. It's quite a job. It's not quite a brush still. There's a little bit more control. But this is something we're going to get to, how John was starting to think, how can I draw, essentially? How can I translate my drawings better? So here we've got a set of drawings for Coventry, and they're all white chalk on black paper. And the reason that you do this when you're designing for glass is because the white mark is the closest corresponding mark to what you're going to get from either the cutter or doing the work yourself. So these are, I think, they're a mixture. So some of them are part size, like the drawing Millie has brought here, which is St Andrew, I believe. It's a sketch for one of the saints at Coventry Cathedral, and this would have been the initial sketch. And I bought as well two here. These are about a third size. So the actual panels were about just over 2 metres tall when I finished making them, but these were a sketch for the customer. And these show a large peacock screen that was made for a deck to keep the wind off when they were eating outside. And you get the clearest, you start to be able to shade tonally, so you draw in black and white and you pull it through to try and get your tones, some of the tones that you might have seen in the angels. So you start off from this point. And now, as Millie and I have been going through this, we've realised the amount. John was very meticulous in his research, so I think the drawings for Coventry took 10 years. And you can see him here drawing away at scale sketching from the model, and I think we've got another actual Coventry as well.
Yeah, there is another picture further down.
Yep.
Do you want me to go down, find it? So, like, these ones?
Yep.
Or
And you can see the leap that you make.
I'll just kind of go back and forth.
So, once you have approval for these ones, you can start to scale up. And so John would photograph these. I just get a ruler and start drawing on the glass, but John would photograph them and he would project up onto paper the right size and then redraw the angel, so he knew what it was doing, because often when you scale up, you have different issues. You suddenly see, something might not work. Like the elbow might not work here, or the leg needs to be moved. And you get a better idea working at scale. So once those were complete, so they would have been up here, then you put them behind the glass and you start marking up on the glass what you're going to do. So you end up with a silhouette on the glass and you start to cut. And I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Do you want to?
Oh, should I? We do, maybe this is a little bit slightly out of order, but we are going to do like a how to do the sort of style that John Hutton was doing.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to sort of mention this drawing that I've bought in from the Dowse collection, which is from the Coventry Cathedral. That was purchased while Melvin Day, who has the paintings outside in the cathedral, when he was the director of the National Art Gallery, he invited John, with the Queen Elizabeth Council funding, to do a tour of New Zealand. And at that time, this is what the letter was relating to, was the purchase of those works, some of the works. And so this was, as you were saying, one of the earlier drawings for Coventry Cathedral, which you can see him working on, which is, I think, quite cool, because it definitely nicely relates to here at St Paul's. The other sort of, we were talking about his wife Marigold, his second wife Marigold, being used as a model for a lot of the drawings, and also I found these pictures of John looking at himself in the mirror to be the... And we were sort of theorising that maybe that's why that St Andrew is quite tall and skinny, maybe, because so is John. Anyway, yeah, should we keep going? So these are some sort of, not amazing quality, but pictures of him working in his workshop with the materials, and you kind of see there's a few similarities about what we've got in front of us as well. And did we want to keep going, or do you want to do...
It's okay, let's keep going.
Let's keep going, alright. No, it's alright. Usually he would be wearing a mask, which Claire will be showing us in a second. So, you know far more about this.
Okay. So this is the Dunkirk Memorial window. It was completed in 1957, and it's the first example that John made on his own without the use of the sandblasting that we saw in the Guildford lunettes. He had been experimenting since '53, when he had been given the Coventry Cathedral commission, and he'd started trying to work out how to make it himself. And this is the first time he made a successful window with it. I think he'd made some Scottish Highlanders before that, but he didn't like them. So it's a beautiful window, and I think it was opened by the Queen Mother at that time. She was very much in admiration of this, but he encountered a few technical difficulties. You can see all the planes coming down with smoke. He didn't realise that the drill would occasionally run away, and it slipped. So he shot several of the planes down in smoke to hide. But it's actually very effective. It conveys more, I think, than his original intention. So it's an example of the technique working.
How does he get the light?
The light, it's just behind it.
So that's nothing to do with the paint. That's just what happened. It just looks so natural, doesn't it?
It is,
So
yeah.
those trees.
I think this is freestanding. It's like the entranceway to the memorial. So you can come in either side, like you came in the narthex today, and you can walk straight outside from here. So it's just the natural light coming in from outside. And that's the great thing about glass engraving, and something you have to be aware of when you design for it is, as the light moves, the faces of the figures that you do will change. So I believe when John was doing other commissions like the Shakespeare Centre, you had to be careful that your figures didn't smirk. In some lights, Lady Macbeth could be, woe is me, such a tragedy, and then she would be looking rather silly. And you need, when you're conveying a psychological state, to be quite mindful of that. Oh.
Coventry.
So the thing that I wanted to convey about John is I think he was about 50 when he completed his first successful window on his own. Prior to that, he'd been a mural painter, a camouflage officer, a lawyer. Like, there are many paths to becoming what we are, and each of them had given him something to solve issues, to work in the way that he chose to work. He always wanted to be a painter. Glass was something that came in sideways, but he's now very well known for. But he wouldn't have been able to do it without all these experiences that he had. And he also was very busy at the same time as designing for Coventry. He'd be doing multiple murals, multiple commissions, multiple glass panels. And here we come to a secular commission, which was his second biggest one, which is the Shakespeare Centre in Stratford-upon-Avon. And this is really similar to the narthex. It's slightly smaller, it's a cube, but it was the original entranceway. You went up some steps and you go in, and there's 19 figures from the play surrounding you. So here we've got Puck and Tatiana, and we've got Romeo and Juliet. And these were just some snapshots I took when I went over to visit and see. They don't use this entranceway anymore, which I find rather sad because it's beautiful. But I think they had an issue. Somebody kicked a football through King Lear, and it had to be remade. So he was missing his face for a little while. And unfortunately they are quite, I think King Lear was a double panel, so it was 2 figures wide, so they had to remake both figures. But again, these are those were around the size of the angels in the narthex. large. This is a fun one. This is New Zealand House in London. And originally there were 2 panels, so either side of the entranceway door. This is flora and fauna in the forest, so he had a lot of fun drawing on sketchbooks from his childhood of birds, trees, just memory even. But unfortunately the second window is not extant anymore. It was just the New Zealand crest, and somebody drove a truck through it in the 90s. So unfortunately glass does break sometimes. And we just thought we'd pop this one in too. And just to talk a little bit about the background of the narthex as well, because it was completed in 1973. It was one of John's much later commissions. He died in 1978. So he was in his late 60s by this point. And it's one thing which I'll talk about with the making of it. It's quite a physical job, so I think he had his son help a little bit with these. He had trained he had twin boys and a younger son, and he trained one of the twins up to help him with the physical side. And his wife too, Marigold, she would help with the polishing as well as the modelling. It was very much a family affair, I guess.
So it sort of talked about the relationship between Melvyn Day and John Hutton before, but I guess one of the things that I wanted to talk to you, Claire, about was what are the significance of these angels, and in terms of their contemporary, I'm going to use the worst word in the world, contemporaneous, why are they so significant?
Okay, I've been thinking quite hard about this, and it's a multi-part answer. This technique is incredibly modern because until the 50s, we didn't have this size glass. We didn't until they invented the float glass process. We couldn't make panels this big. So there's one thing. We also just didn't have the tool technology to be able to use and make the marks that we did and to treat it like a canvas. It was very much old craftsmen, quite, you were entailed into apprenticeship. You didn't get the opportunity to think outside the box and think, maybe I could do this. I was also thinking a lot about the way in which they're presented. We sort of thought why the sort of X formation, because all of them are created that way. And I know when he created Coventry, he wanted to create a transverse movement, so everything wasn't so static, because you've got all the saints and they're all upright, and every other row are angels and they're moving and they're busy. And this is probably not answering your question, is it?
No, I mean,
I think he wanted to create more of a feeling of energy and life with these angels that perhaps hadn't been seen before in this sort of context. In Coventry, they were nicknamed the footballer angels. Some of them, the footballer angels, because I think all the workers, they were mainly Irish and they were mainly concerned with football, and they do look a bit like that. So it's certainly a contemporary style of imaging from that viewpoint. I'm just going to hand back to you, so perhaps you can prompt me a little.
okay. And obviously because they're very open, they're sort of very dynamic, they kind of inviting everybody in. It's very fancy, even today. But just they take so much time, right? Years of time, even with the family sort of helping out. So one of the things that is not off the top of my mind, but there's not many glass panels of John's in New Zealand, is there?
No, there's not. I think these are probably the largest extant examples of John's work here. We have heard rumours that there are some situated, I think, in the old art gallery building on the quay, in a stairwell somewhere. We're going to go sleuthing and find them. But mostly there are vases, there are small panelled studies, and there are drawings here. So we're really lucky to have these here. I think worldwide there are probably only half a dozen sites of really large work, mainly because a lot of the commissions involve multiple figures. So between probably 57 and 77, he engraved 200 life-size figures, and I think 66 of them are in Coventry and 10 of them are here. So it's a massive undertaking for somebody in the latter part of their life to do that.
And the other thing, sort of in the later half of his life, and he learned very quickly in terms of 20 years essentially of practice to become one of the foremost glass engraver in the world. And so much so that he was the vice president of the newly founded British Guild of Glass Engravers, which was formed in 1975. And Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, was its first patron. And he worked right up until 1978 when he passed away. And his ashes are buried at the foot of the west screen at Coventry Cathedral. So that's sort of the significance, and also that linking back from these angels here, Coventry, St Paul's, and I really like the links. I keep finding all these sort of links back and forth between the sites, which was really great. And you've got a story about Warwick.
I do. Okay, so here you can see John and his son Warwick, who was one of the twins they had. And Warwick was the one he trained as a glass engraver. Warwick was also an illustrator in his own right and used to do a lot of children's books. But Warwick, as most of us do, we had multiple strands of income between commissions, and he started to teach glass engraving. I think it was at Morley College in London, and it was here that my teacher, how I learned this, Jennifer Conway, she met Warwick and she started to learn of him, and then she wanted to meet John, so she started to work with John, and this was pretty late, mid-70s, and Jenny just became obsessed. She first learned stipple engraving, which is the complete opposite. It's tiny, and you can see the little girl playing chess here. That's actually on a goblet, and it's about this big. So stipple is when it's completely manual. You have a tiny little tool with a pin, like a diamond pin in it, and you tap, 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 and you get tonal. It's like pointillism for glass, essentially, and it can be very rich. You can get multiple tones, and it was great grounding for learning how to think big with tonal. And I've just included a couple of images that I could find here. Jenny was very much about not being on the internet, so there's surprisingly little, but one window is from St Nicholas. I think the middle window is from a church, I believe, in Waltham in Essex, and it's a separation screen. I'm not sure whether it's a rood screen. I didn't get much information, but I just thought you might like to see how it had been continued. They're from the 90s, and also, just for fun, we have some life drawing engraved, so we have some torsos from behind. These are also photographs of John's last studio. I was fortunate enough through Jenny to meet Marigold, John's second wife, and his daughter Katie. And these panels that you see here on this side are Panoma and Sayers. And they were my first encounter with John's engravings as a young girl. My father was helped clearing out Fison's in Ipswich, which is they made fertiliser, but they had a lot of money and they wanted to pretty their office up, so they had the goddesses of agriculture made for them. And when I was about 10, we were helping, Fison's were moving, we were clearing out for them, and I said, "Dad, what's that? Can we have those?" And he said, "Oh, I better ask, I better check." We got permission, but we went back 2 days later and they were gone. Marigold had rescued them. But when I walked in the studio van for the first time, there they were. And I'd forgotten all about them. I was only 10 or 11. And I just thought you might want some context. So the little sketchbook in the corner is his first sketchbook as a teenager. And I think that's probably Tamaranui up there. And he loved music, so he played guitar to help get rid of the RSI from the glass engraving, and his guitar was still in the studio. I thought it was nice. So we're going to get into the technical part of the talk now, and we're going to talk some terminology. And I've already heard people use the term etching and engraving quite interchangeably, and I'm here to tell you that you must use engraving. Etching is chemical. And Matt will understand this, it's quite closely linked to printmaking. You etch the metal plate, you can etch glass, but it's all chemical. Engraving, how the angels are made, it's all manual and it's made with hand and mechanised tools. And here you can see my toolbox, and I brought a few tools with me. The big blue machine is my motor that I use to power my drill, and it's a modern version of what John would use to make the engravings. And I brought my handpiece along. Normally it's attached to a 2-metre cable, and I was describing to Matt yesterday how it's a bit like wrestling a python. You normally need 2 hands, because even at a slow speed of 800 RPM, it wants to do what it wants to do and thrash around a lot. But I brought a couple of wheels along, and the wheels I've actually bought are John's wheels. I was given them. So the one on here is one of John's, and I have a little wheel which you can pass around, and these are from a firm called Luke & Spencer, and it's defunct now, but luckily Jenny gave me a whole box. So this is made of silicon carbide. It causes the whitest marks that you see on the engravings. So it'll cause all these bits here. And I have a sample as well, a little portrait, and the whitest marks are caused by this particular wheel. And what have we got? So you may be wondering, like, how does he make the other marks? Normally, when you make the engraving, you will mat in a silhouette with the coarse wheel that we're handing round, and then you'll start to think about the tones in your drawing. And this is quite simple. This is a rubber wheel from a car manufacturer, and it's got sandpaper on it. And I make strips of these. I'm very fortunate to not have to do what John did. He used to paint them with glue and cut them up when required, and he said it was like fly paper. I've got double-sided tape. It's great. This is my best friend. So I just rip strips of these when required. Luckily, 1 sheet of sandpaper, the width is perfect for my little wheels. And at the moment I've got 80 grit on here, and that matches the wheel that we're handing round. And we do this so that it has the same abrasion rate. So this will court start to polish, but I'll go through different grits. And it's like in a pencil drawing, you go through tonally from soft to hard, and you create different tones. And the finest wheel, you hope, will create a beautiful I call it back to black. It's clear. It'll go back to clear, and will create a positive and a negative in the drawing, and you can see it much more in the round. It creates your highlights.
It's almost like a rubber.
It is. It actually is pretty much a rubber. And
You mean an eraser?
yes. Yes, oh, I don't wish to be rude, I'm so sorry. But yes, we can use that term. And I also wanted to show you can be quite delicate. This is baby. The other big one is jumbo. And it's the same tool, essentially, with the small wheels. Normally I have little green ones on here, today I've got pink. And I also use little points. So I've got a few here. These are embedded with diamonds, and you use them for very fine lines.
Is small one still unwieldy?
Yes. Honestly, I can use this with one hand, but because it's smaller, you use it at a higher speed, and it has even more tendency to run away if you're not careful. This technology is also used by contemporary greenstone carvers. So that's how I kind of first learned about it when I was working in Gary's hot glass studio. He would do some basic engraving, and he learned it off Don Salt. And they sort of worked out you could use these instead of traditional lathe or other traditional tools. And it crossed over really well. Glass is a little bit harder than greenstone, but it still works. Yep. Okay. You look amazing when you engrave glass, and you need a lot of safety gear. So I wear one of these. Glass dust is not your friend. It's like an uninvited guest. It will remain, and it settles in the lungs, unfortunately. So most of the time when you're cutting glass, you spray with water, but as a precaution, you wear these. You wear these. It's very noisy. It's like being at the dentist full time when I work. You have wellies because you get rather wet. You wear, gosh, I bought the dirty apron, didn't I? Yes. Oh, would you like to? Yay. I never have people to dress up. This is fun. Let's dress up Millie. So she doesn't quite have the wellies on that are required. Sometimes when you're working and you're carving deeply, you really need a lot of water. And sometimes it can get into the boots. But yes, you look good. You might want to...
Oh, I don't know if I need to put
I'll show you, to prevent RSI, these are a good friend. You have to wrap them. I can't put them on very well, but they really help your thumbs be your thumbs a lot longer, because otherwise sometimes you can't move them. And I've just bought various other, it's quite utilitarian. These are for changing wheels. These are for when the wheels don't behave. Occasional eye protection if I remember to put it on, because glass can chip. And it usually wants to go here. But on here also, so I've got a trolley for storage, and I also thought I'd show you my easel. I work upright. I don't work reaching across a table when you've got a giant panel and you want to put something in the middle. It's a bit hard. So I work upright. And this particular easel, I think we've got a kuni pig sitting on there for a bus shelter. These are, to give you some scale, these are about 1 metre 20 squared.
Does the piano move up and down, the glass?
Oh, I wish. No, it's too heavy. The smaller panels I can lift in and out. These I need to get the glaziers in with the big suckers to move them.
So you could say when you're doing it, you have to move up and down.
I do. Engraving up a ladder's fun. And that's what John did a lot. He would have, for the angels here, he would have been up a ladder. And often, especially when you're working with a small drill, you've got the pedal between the knees and you're desperately balancing on one foot. Up 1.5 meters in the air.
Don't tell Osh.
No, I won't, but fortunately Osh won't come round. Okay, I wanted to give you a bit of scope of what engraving can be. So these are mirrors, and John did make mirrors as well towards the end of his life. He made an enormous one for Pilkington Glassworks. I think it was the Three Graces, and it was blue. So these ones are just silvered, but the engraving's on the back, and then you pour the silvering solution on the engraved part to become a mirror. And this also gives you your tones. The tones that you see in the angels on these panels then become more like I was talking about in pencil drawing. You get shades of grey. And the reason why you silver on the back and why you don't cut on the front is you don't end up with parallax error, because you get a reflection of what you've cut. And it's very disconcerting for somebody looking in the mirror, especially if it's their bathroom mirror, like, oh, I'm seeing double. I haven't got my contacts in. This is a very utilitarian example of glass engraving at work. This is a bus shelter I did for Wanganui District Council. And it's right by the sea. This is in Castle Cliff. And it's to do with all the flora that are around the area. So we've got a nio tree, we've got a convolvulus hawk moth and the convolvuli underneath. We've got a katapo creeping up the middle stalk of the pingao, a giant dragonfly, and, oh gosh, I can't remember what the tumbleweed thing's called. And we also have on this side flax and the toi, the flowers. And that's about 5 metres in length, maybe a bit more. It was my first big one where I actually suddenly worked out the problems of, I came to grips with it, the glass engraving.
5 metres.
Yeah, it took a long time, and we are, at the moment, some friendly person broke the pingao. So we've just crowdfunded, and they also smashed part of the nio tree. So that's in at the moment. It's got a 3-prong crack, but we've got enough money for me to redo them. But I really hope they don't break them again. This is also for scale, and this relates to these guys. This is the peacock screen, and the one on this side is in situ, and they have a dining table in front of it. It's like under a louvered pergola, so it creates an outdoor space. And I had no idea when I started drawing for the client that Whistler's peacock room was her favourite thing in the world. She had specifically said no birds. And I was like, oh, I think, look, there's peacocks in your orchard eating things. So I think I want to make peacocks. Just because they're so much fun to engrave. And to play with something a little more informal in setting. So they are vying for the attention of the pecan while in the apple orchard. And I thought you might like something with wings outstretched. This was a commission for New Build in New Plymouth, and he's about 90 centimetres, a metre square. He's a little black cormorant, and he's full life size. And this time what we've done is the cuts are mounted outward, so you can still touch them, but they've set them apart like in a little shadow box on a black background. And so you get a shadow, the bird casts a shadow onto the background, and he changes throughout the day. He's in a breezeway with a lot of light coming through the ceiling. But I just thought you might like something with wings. This is also giving you a scope of, again, what engraving can be. These are engravings that have been gilded on the reverse side. And I started to work with gold leaf as an alternative to silvering because it's a lot less toxic. It's fun to do. So just a bit of fun. We've got a mirror ball and a crescent moon mirror and something slightly more old-fashioned that I got asked to do. These are antique cider goblets, and this was for a cidery in Masterton. They're called TP cider, and they make a cider called the Earl's Drop, and they make an apple and a perry. So it's just an example of being able to thinking around with glass engraving, which you don't always get to do. So the design spirals down the neck of the goblet for both of them. And that's that. So we're going to open the floor to questions, please.
Thank you. You've got a question?
Could you tell us about ordering your glass, and would it be similar to what John Hutton used ages ago? I mean, I'm looking, you've got some samples, which is lovely, but is it easy to get the strengthened glass, or just could you tell us about it?
Okay, so that's a really, really good question. I know John used around 10 to 11 millimetre glass. It's quite thick, it's about 1 centimetre thick. And that was the definition of old-fashioned safety glass, really. It was a bit thicker. Today, I generally work on 6 mil and going upwards. 6 mils for the smaller works, up to about 1 metre square. Especially if they're being hung as a picture, you need to keep the weight down. If they're being set architecturally, I usually work on 10.38 millimetre laminate, which is a sandwich. And it's essentially 2 panels of single glaze with glue in the middle. And it will hold together if somebody smacks it. So instead of tempered glass, which has been high temperature treated in an oven, will completely shatter into tiny, tiny little fragments. Not so with laminate. It will hold together until the glass can be replaced. But John wouldn't have worked with that. He would have just worked with a thicker, single glazed, regular glass. But the thing that's changed over time is Coventry was done not on float glass. It wasn't invented quite then. It was still being perfected by Pilkington. And he was working on what we know as plate glass, which also is the reason of the size of the saints in Coventry. They're quite narrow. It was just the way the machine could pour the glass at that time. Does that help-ish?
No, that's great. And so you get what you want readily.
Oh yes, this is the reason why I work as an engraver. I can go to the glaziers and ask for what I want. It's much... When I worked as a glass blower, you are limited by so many things. It's an amazing craft, but you have to have so much knowledge how to manage a furnace, how to up your skill, and as a small female, you need a friendly tribe sometimes around you of males if you want to upscale your work. So being able to order what I need from the glaziers, whether it's a circle, an oval, polished edges, unpolished edges, laminate or not, they can drop it off, put it in my easel, I can work. It's...
Well done, and thank you for sharing your knowledge.
You're welcome. Do we have any other questions, please?
Yes, the Coventry Cathedral, was there a competition or was he just appointed?
No, it was a competition and you had to submit quite detailed schema. I believe the architect supplied you with a rough idea of what the screen would look like, and you had to make up, I think, probably the drawing was about as high as me and as wide, and he folded it all up. And I think we have I'll just go back in the slideshow. Yeah.
You know exactly which one you want.
So that one. Okay, so you can see John here with all the tiny little figures. He's very carefully drawn. I think this was to scale as well, so he knew what he would be dealing with. And you can see the saints and the little alternating angels going through. And these, he folded them, I think initially he folded each row into like a paste book so he could transport them when he was going to meet with the diocese. The diocese, that's right. And there may have been a couple of other people in competition, they may have asked, but everything has to go through quite a lengthy approval process, and then I believe once the initial conception was approved, they then gave him all the saints that they wanted him to use. And he very much wanted more women saints, I think, just to break it up a bit. So, but they're all British saints within the thing from the early times of converting to Christianity in Britain. Does that help?
I'm conscious of time. We didn't really want to have everything done by midday. I must say I have a newfound respect for the work. We were discussing how a wheel works last night, and I said it sounds to me like trying to have a wheel polisher on this floor when it runs out of control. And to do that on one leg up a ladder is even more impressive. So, thank you both for your knowledge and expertise. I also know to make sure that my boys aren't playing any ball games near the narthex, but have ruled that that's ready. Please stay for tea and coffee if you wish to, and we can obviously have a bit more of a conversation then. In the meantime, I'm going to ask Jane to come forward. With this, we'll thank you for our guests, and please... Oh yes, one last thing. We have a sheet of paper on the side by the Cohar Bowl. If you're interested in getting any updates on the broad category we have of art in the cathedral, we hope to have future events. And certainly out of yesterday's conversation, there was a whole discussion around whether we could be involved with a Roy Cowan mural that we'd like to see open to the public again. So if you'd like to hear any updates on that sort of information, please put your email address on that as well. And once more, a round of applause. Thank you.
Honey at the bottom there, and olive oil and thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I did have permission, so it's good.
Skeleton.
Yes, yeah.
Or could be, they're not the friendliest of creatures. Angels have different forms and they come
Your trips? Where are you from?
York.